evening. Thank everybody for joining us. Roxanne and I are very excited to talk about a subject that's very near and dear to our hearts, and that is a great shelter supervisor. Next slide, please. My name is Jody Wallace, and I am a volunteer. I joined in 2005. And back when I joined the Red Cross, when we arrived on an operation, what they used to do is they would take all the sheltering people, put us in an area, and they would say, if you are a supervisor, please raise your hand. So even though I actually was a supervisor for several years, I actually never interested in raising my hand. My husband and I owned our own business, and to be really honest, I was dealing with employees all the time, and I was really happy just to go out, help what I could do to take care of clients and make friends and just have a really good experience on deployments. And I did this for quite a few years. And then I came home from one particularly bad deployment. And I actually was in the kitchen venting to my husband about it when my teenage son walked in the kitchen looking for something to eat. And he didn't say anything as I continued just kind of, telling my husband everything that had transpired. So as my son was getting ready to leave, he looked at me and he said, "So Mom, do you remember what you always told us?" And I kind of knew I was in trouble at that. And I said, no, I don't. And he said, "You always told us either stand up or shut up." And he walked out of the kitchen while my husband stood there kind of smirking. And I actually realized that my son was right. If I wanted to have a say in how we did things in the shelter, how we treated our clients, how we treated our volunteers, then I needed to be in the position to be able to help make some decisions and give some of that input. So the next deployment I went on just a couple months later, when they got us all together and they said, okay, raise your hand if you were a supervisor, I was one of the first ones that put my hand up. And it definitely was one of the best decisions that I ever made. Anyway, I will turn it over to Roxanne now.
Thanks, Jody. Hi, everyone. My name is Roxanne Morris. I am a shelter supervisor and the mass care coordinator for Marin County, and I had my first deployment in 2017. I wanted to become a supervisor because in the beginning, when I first deployed, I was really drawn to the Red Cross mission and taking care of clients during a disaster. That desire quickly expanded to really wanting to provide a rewarding experience and take care of our volunteer staff. And I really enjoy managing teams. And for me, a really rewarding deployment is providing quality service to our clients and towards our volunteer staff. And I realized that by being a supervisor, similar to what Jody said, was the best way that I could make decisions that would help people put their best selves forward during a disaster. And of course, that would trickle down to providing excellent care for our clients. So I would like to also introduce our shelter mascot.
Roxanne, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Too many buttons here. Sorry about that. This is our shelter mascot, the quokka. This little critter is found in Western Australia, and he's a great symbol for Jody and I. He basically reminds us to be friendly, be courteous, be approachable, and of course, always try to have a little joy in one's life. So we always like to have this guy in our presentations. So we are really excited to have you all join us this evening. We're very excited about this presentation. And basically, we've used our sheltering experience in large-scale disaster operations to try and reframe some of the familiar supervisor topics. So tonight we're going to talk about the start of your deployment, the SV roles and how they compare during the different stages of an operation cycle, practical evaluation tips, those are always important, realistic expectations for day shift and night shift supervisors and how they compare, how to get organized for shift change meetings, and lastly, steps that you can take today to make a difference on your next assignment. And if anyone has any questions, I encourage folks to use the chat, and we will try to pause at the end of each section to answer the questions posted. It is our hope that our discussion this evening will complement your existing experience and empower you to be a better supervisor on your next deployment. So let's begin. Your supervisor assignment, and again, apologies for the abbreviation of supervisor, your assignment starts at home, so of course, pack accordingly. I encourage you to get a hold of a copy of the IAP and print it and bring it with you. And yes, it helps if you actually read it before you arrive to the operation. The listed hardship codes are important things to consider and could affect your role and abilities as a supervisor. For example, are there expected power outages? Bringing in a backup battery and solar chargers can be helpful in keeping your devices on. Will there be poor air quality? Making sure that you have good quality masks on your person or carry on when you arrive can be very helpful. And never trust checked bags. Assume the likelihood of staying in a staff shelter. I always bring a power strip, sleep mask, earplugs, and shower shoes. Embrace the glory of night shift. Assume you will be assigned to night shift and bring appropriate nighttime clothes and a headlight. Always, always, always bring snacks and bring enough so that you can be fed for at least 12 hours. Food may not be available depending on when you arrive, and being hangry truly, truly sucks. Check the weather for both day and night and assume you could be out in both. And always bring a small notepad and multiple pens and keep them on your person while traveling. When you arrive to your reporting location, you should already have your pad and pen out in use. I actually keep my notepad in the back of my pants so that I won't lose it. True story. Good preparation also means understanding the expectations for a supervisor. Depending on the operation, a supervisor is expected to be familiar with the roles and skills listed here. You should be able to access and use Red Cross email and Teams. MCPC cards, you should know what those are and have an idea about how to reconcile them. Be familiar with the standard shelter forms. Know that you might be asked to contribute to the SITREP. We definitely rely on smartphones, which includes texting and computers. It is possible that you'll need to create work shift schedules and plan for the future. You might also be asked to perform shelter manager duties. Training incoming shelter associates and event-based volunteers is very important, as well as being familiar with the differences of night shift operations. If any of these concepts are unfamiliar or hard to remember from your last deployment as a supervisor, we strongly recommend a general review of these topics before you arrive on the operation. This could be a quick search on the exchange or a chat with a phone a friend while in transit. I have done both. Is there any questions about any of this before we move to the next section?
We don't have any questions. I just want to touch on two things. IAP stands for Incident Action Plan, and MCPC card is the Mass Care Procurement Card, and we do have a session coming up for Mass Care Procurement Card. That's it.
I definitely plan to be attending that one. Yeah, very excited to see that. Great. All right, thanks. Sorry again for the acronyms. Okay, so Jody's now going to discuss the SV roles in the sheltering operational cycle. Jody? You might be on mute.
Jody, you're on mute.
My apologies. All right, let's try this again. So the first thing that we want to touch base on is that when you report to headquarters, now having a shelter supervisor gap actually gives you the ability to fill two different roles. One is you may be assigned as a supervisor reporting to the shelter manager, where that gap also gives you the ability to be assigned as the shelter manager. So it's important when you're at headquarters to understand exactly which of those roles you will be taking on, because depending on that, then determines who you are reporting to. If I'm deploying as the supervisor, I will be reporting to the shelter manager. If I am assigned as the shelter manager, I will report to the sheltering lead at headquarters. So you want to make sure which one of those roles. And what I have learned is never make assumptions. All right, so that will talk about your assignment. Where are you going? It's important to realize, especially for new supervisors, that it's very different when you are having a shelter at a fairgrounds versus a church or a senior center or a rec center. So try and find out as many details as you can at headquarters about the facility that you will be at. Who is reporting to you? If you are the shelter supervisor, you're going to be having the shelter service associates under you. If you're the shelter manager, you are ultimately responsible for everybody at the shelter, right? But your direct report will be the supervisor. And you want to make sure if your team, if you're deploying from headquarters at a team, make sure to exchange phone numbers. I had a problem on a deployment one time, and we actually had forgotten to exchange phone numbers before we left headquarters. And part of the team had been at the shelter working on setting up for about an hour, and we still had not seen the other members. And since I had forgotten to get phone numbers, I actually had to call for help to headquarters, which is not something that you want to do at the beginning of the operation. So make sure that you've got phone numbers. If you are a supervisor going into a shelter that already is opened up, make sure that you've got the phone number for the shelter manager in case you run into a problem. That could be, you could get lost, you could be delayed due to road conditions, but you want to make sure that you can contact. Also, what do you need? Is there items that you may have to take with you? Sometimes headquarters will say, hey, we've got these things, can you pack it with you? If I'm opening a new shelter, do I need to go by and see DST, which is our disaster technology? Do I need to pick up a phone, printer, laptop? Do I need to make a quick stop and pick up some snacks or water? So make sure that you understand before you leave headquarters exactly what you will be taking with you. Thank you. All right, so these are the three areas that we're going to talk about. 1, opening a brand new shelter. 2, walking into a shelter that already has been open and has clients in it. And then as far as closing a shelter as well. And this is a very simple table of organization. So as you can see, shelter manager is in charge for the overall care and well-being of our clients as well as the shelter. The day shift and night shift supervisors report directly to the shelter managers. The service associates report to both the day shift and the night supervisors. One of the things that you want to make sure of as a supervisor is that if there is a question or a problem, any type of issue, you want to make sure that your service associates come to you as the supervisor first. If you cannot solve the problem or you don't have the answer, then you in turn go to the shelter manager. but we want to try and keep that chain of command. It simplifies things, right? So if you are working with new service associates and you're letting them know from the get-go, hey, I'm here as a supervisor. I am your first point of contact for anything that you need. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to go and we are going to be opening a brand new shelter. Next slide. As we talked about before, you may be assigned as either a shelter manager or as the supervisor, and each has a slightly different role. So when I first arrive at a shelter, if I am the shelter manager, I want to do a walkthrough through the facility. Even though logistics has had their facilities person come through and do a walkthrough with the property owner, as a shelter manager, I want to make sure and double check. If there is anything that I see that is out of place, that is damaged, that is missing, I make myself a note in my notebook so that down the road, if there is ever any question and the facilities person, when they go to return this, comes and questions me, I can say, yeah, I did see that mirror was broken when we were getting ready to set up. So doing a quick walkthrough, very important. Take a look at, do we have the supplies and the equipment that we need in order to open this? Do I have a shelter trailer on site? When I open that shelter trailer, do I actually have 50 or 100 or 200 cots and blankets and comfort kits that I'm expecting? All right, take a look. Again, do I have a laptop? Do I need a laptop? Did I bring one with me? What do I need to put in a 6409, which is a purchase requisition? What items might I need? Identify your two supervisors. So again, I've got day shift and I've got night shift. All right, so I need to make sure which supervisor is covering which shift. And then I need to make sure which service associates are going to be working those shifts as well and reporting to that supervisor. Now, if I'm coming in and I am the supervisor, I'm going to be doing things a little bit different. I'm going to be I'm point of contact and I'm greeting the service associates. I'm going to get them coordinated as a team. What do we need to do to get the shelter open? And usually when we're trying to open a shelter, both shifts are helping to get things started. So maybe I'm going to pull a couple of my service associates and I say, hey, I need you two to please open and start setting up cots. I need these. I've got these couple over here. Hey, I need you guys to go back and start organizing the kitchen. And could you guys over there start pulling tables and setting up the registration table? Also, generally, the shelter manager will have the supervisor kind of take a walk around, identify areas that can be set up for disaster health services and disaster mental health when they show up. We are not having to set anything up on their behalf, but we do want to have areas identified for their use. Next slide, please.
Okay, before you jump to the next slide, I just wanted to take several of the questions here and to ask you. Dave had a question, is that if we have a larger shelter that might have additional SV supervisors, such as different ones covering for feeding, dormitory area, registrations, who do those supervisors report to?
All the supervisors will be reporting to the shelter manager.
Okay.
Okay.
And so Dave also recommended take photos of anything that there's any damage or anything. And Suzanne has a question as, does the shelter manager or the shelter supervisor have a copy of the walkthrough list, the checklist that logistics have?
You know what? I have seen this both ways, to be really honest. I do know people that actually carry their own checklist and they will walk through that. I want to say, in my experience, that's usually the exception more than the norm. but a lot of shelter managers and supervisors will print out a copy so they have something to walk through. And I do like the idea of taking pictures. I think that actually is a great idea, as well as making a note of it so it can be discussed with facilities at the end. So that's a great idea.
Thank you. And we have several suggestions, which we'll go over later. You can continue. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please, Roxanne. All right, so now I am a supervisor and I have been assigned to come in. Let's say shelter has been open for a week and now I'm coming in to assist. What's really important when you go into a shelter is to take the time and give it a day or two to learn the processes that already are going on. We want to be looking to see if there's any suggestions for improvement that we can offer, but you want to be very careful. So remember, the first couple days, even up to the first week after a disaster in a shelter, you know, people are tired and they've been doing their best to get things set up, take care of clients to the best of their ability. And as a fresh pair of eyes coming in, I may look around and think, wow, why did they do this? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. So it's all about in the delivery. So if you come in and you see something and you think, you know, I think I have a better way that we might be able to do this, approach the shelter manager respectfully. Make sure, again, it's all in that presentation. Hey, you know, I saw this and I was thinking this might help keep our inventory, better, or I was thinking that I have a suggestion to help with this. So again, look for ways that you can help improve what's going on. Make sure that you deliver it in a respectful way, and also be prepared. The shelter manager may say, thank you for the suggestion, but I like the way we're doing it. Integrate into the existing team, right? Because as the supervisor, those service associates, they now are going to be yours. So you want to do the best that you can to make them part of your team, vice versa. They already have been a team, so you want to integrate and become part of their team as well. Learn about clients. Ask your service associates, hey, you know, could you walk around with me? Is there anything that I need to know about anybody? Use the knowledge of the team that is already there to, one, help educate you about clients, as well as to start building that rapport. Review both the current and the future work schedules. It's important to know, when is somebody taking a day off? Do we have someone to cover, or are we okay to be short one man down on that shift? Likewise, we need to make sure that we know exactly the out processing. When I'm setting up for staffing, what I want to do is I actually want to know when is the last day that someone is working. I don't particularly care when they're out processing, getting on that airplane, going home. I want to know, what is your last day that you will be here working the shift. So if I'm walking in, I always say, hey, I was wondering if I can take a look and, you know, let's see what the schedule is. Talk to, well, let's try this again. Shadow the shelter manager. See what they're doing, understand what their expectations are of you as a supervisor. Every shelter manager has their own way of doing things. Some shelter managers are more easygoing, and basically they will say, I am here, I am available for you. Questions, concerns, or anything, come and find me, let me know. All right. Other shelter managers, they like to hold on a little bit more, and they may say, okay, any situation that arises, I want to know about it immediately. I want to be involved. I want to know what the decision is, and I want to have the final say so. So again, talk to the shelter manager, find out what your role is, how they want you to best support them. It's also a fantastic time to start looking at reconciling our registration binder. One of the biggest things that we run into is the first couple days. It's crazy. We've got clients coming in and registering. We may have clients leaving. There's a lot of activities. So I may turn around as the new supervisor and go, man, it looks like there's about 75 clients sleeping in the dorm, but I'd say I've probably got 200 registration forms in that binder. So this is the good opportunity to start working on reconciling who exactly is in my shelter, making sure that those registration forms are current in my binder, and pulling the registration forms of anyone who is no longer there and putting them aside. Next slide, please. Now, basically what we did is we kind of gave you a list of some of the gaps, group activities that you might see coming through the shelter and spending time with you, right? Logistics, we usually see a lot more at the beginning or when things are being delivered. Unsolicited donations, you know, are going to be showing up as people in the community drop things off. Hopefully we've got a good feeding person there. Shelter resident transition and your client caseworkers, those will be the groups coming in and out to assist in seeing what steps are necessary to help our clients transition out of the shelter. Disaster health services and disaster mental health. Sometimes we're lucky and we have these functions there at least one full shift. Sometimes in the beginning, we may have them on both shifts. Sometimes they may be on call if they're shorthanded. These two groups, to me, I consider two of the most important groups. Whether I'm a shelter manager or a shelter supervisor, I make sure as soon as these guys are walking in the door, whether I know them or not, I let them know, thank you for coming, thank you for being here, because without them, our job running the shelter becomes much more difficult. The other thing is, I have never met anyone in health services or mental health that if I was shorthanded on shelter people was not more than willing to jump in and help with whatever I needed to get done. So very important people, always make friends. Disaster services technology, they may pop by. I've got a printer, it doesn't work. They may be bringing me a replacement, or my hotspot isn't working. Public affairs, external partners, these are people that may be popping by, right? Nobody's going to be staying at the shelter. But again, these are groups that you may be seeing during deployments and getting to know. Next slide, please.
Jody,
All
before
right.
to next slide, I just want to make sure several comments are mentioned here. Cynthia said SRT shelter resident transition team is embedded under shelter manager and will have their own supervisor on site, and their caseworkers will work closely with shelter and all services with registration and health services. Helen Brooks, one of our reunification regional lead in Los Angeles, that mentioned that she didn't see reunification listed on the ones earlier that on your slide. And Laura mentioned that because oftentimes reunifications work out of the headquarters or they're usually remote and they move from one shelter to another shelter. That's why it was not originally listed. But reunification is extremely important as well. Okay, keep going. Thank you.
Absolutely. You know what? And that's a really good point. We do apologize that we should have noted reunification on that as well. But yes, a lot of times it is done virtually. So I do apologize that we forgot that. All right. So now our shelter has been open. Things have changed, and we have been advised that we are going to be closing down our shelter. So how do we make this still? We want our clients to feel that we have done the best that we could in taking care of them. We want to make sure that we give them a good goodbye. Even though they are going through a really difficult time, we want our clients to feel that the Red Cross has been there to support them, to take care of them. So that last day, those last few hours can definitely make a really big impression. Part of that may be, now sometimes we have clients, they may be moving to a different shelter if we are consolidating. Sometimes they are leaving, but we can help. What can we do? We can give them assistance in packing up their belongings, right? Putting things in boxes, bags. Are we able to maybe provide snacks in a bag and some water for them to take? If they're moving from one shelter to another, we want to help make sure that their possessions, all their bags are labeled with their names. Depending on if they are being transported by bus or car, we still can help them get their possessions out, get things loaded, right? And to be honest, I usually stay out there until all my clients are gone. I'm waving to people, right? I want them to leave and think that we really were there for them in their time of need. So remember, if a client's at a shelter for a week, clients at a shelter for a few days, when people first come in, there is so much happening. And even though they may be appreciative, their brains are processing a lot of stuff. So the last thing that you do, the last time they think of you, right, that is what's going to stick in their head, right? So whatever we can do, if we're helping them load pets, right, all those things make a difference to a good goodbye. All right, so now we've got an empty facility. What do? We need to start taking it back down, getting things ready to turn back over to the facility owner. So that involves taking down cots, cleaning them, packing them back up, putting them nicely in a specific area so that when logistics comes by to pick up supplies, everything is in one spot. Anything that you are packing up to take, be it the coffee pot, whatever things belong to the Red Cross, our coolers, right? Everything should be put in one spot, neatly organized to help make it easy when logistics comes by. You want to make sure that the binder that contains our registration, the binder that contains the shelter manager logs, anything that we would consider confidential paperwork needs to be secured. I usually take it, wrap a couple rubber bands around it, make sure it's in either the shelter manager's vehicle, or they may say to you as a supervisor, hey, make sure that we get this back to headquarters. Other things can be packed up. Those items are very important. We need to make sure that they do get delivered to headquarters. Finish any paperwork. Is there anything that you started? Maybe you had to make a last couple entries in the shelter manager logs, whatever. This is the perfect time. Take down tables, stack up chairs. We usually run a couple brooms across the floors, right? We want to have the property owner or facility manager walk in and take a look around and say, wow, these guys really clean this place up. Remember, we want to make sure as well that we've got a good goodbye to the people that have let us use that facility. So the next time, if there's another disaster, we can go to them and say, hey, could we please open this up as a shelter again? So those last impressions are very important. You may or may not see somebody from the facility. A lot of times I will have somebody kind of walk through and they'll say, well, I just wanted to kind of see if there's any issues, right? They know that they will be doing a walkthrough again with the facilities, our facilities person, right? But a lot of times they just want to walk through with me to make sure, is there anything? Was there any problems? Is there anything that we didn't do? Hey, we forgot to empty all those trash cans in the bathroom, right? Those little details on how you leave the shelter when we depart will make a big impression on the people in charge of that facility. Any questions? Anything in the chat?
We have
So,
several comments in the chat.
Okay.
Don't forget to mark the broken cost for disposal. Dump everything going back to the logistics. Haphazardly totes. These should have counts on what is in the tote for returning to inventory. And Robin said, remember a good goodbye to volunteers as well. The Scott SRT Shelter Resident Transition Team is crucial as closing is announced.
Absolutely. Okay. Geez, great suggestions. Thank you, guys. We might have even talked about some of this stuff. It just might not have quite made it into our slides, so we do appreciate that.
I love all the input and stuff. This is a great group.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to our next section, which is supervisor engagement. And supervisors spend the majority of their time and energy providing support for the shelter manager, clients, and service associates while assisting with shelter operations. And these roles and expectations of a supervisor can differ among these groups. So let's start with the relationship a supervisor has with the shelter manager. Supervisors and shelter managers, they can work very closely to take care of the clients, volunteers, and the facility. Experienced supervisors, especially on day shift, are expected to think like managers and try to see the larger picture of the shelter and operation. Supervisors might have a bigger role in managing the service associates and event-based volunteers than the manager. And depending on experience, supervisors may also be encouraged to solve problems that arise during daily operations. And finally, an experienced supervisor may be field promoted to act as a shelter manager. This can happen if there are no managers to fill the role or if a manager has a scheduled day off. A supervisor will also spend a considerable amount of time with clients. No surprise there. Depending on the size of the shelter, the manager may not have a lot of time to engage with clients and will therefore rely on their supervisors to be their eyes and ears in the shelter. Therefore, it is vital that supervisors are active and walk the shelter inside and out. This will allow supervisors to be approachable and interact with more clients than if they were just to sit at the registration table all shift. Supervisors are expected to give quality answers and correct information. Both should be based on credible sources from the manager or headquarters. Supervisors will also provide considerable support to the shelter service associates. I love this photo. This is a photo of me on one of my deployments, one of my only photos actually. And I'm with, it's me and our shelter supervisor and another SA. And we are on night shift and we were having some fun playing dress up with hazmat suits. This is back in 2018. This wasn't recent. And we were on a break and having some fun. The three of us were actually assigned to night shift for 2 weeks at a shelter with approximately 150 clients and accompanying pets. And teamwork made it possible for our undersized team to deliver the Red Cross mission with smiles on our faces and create a deep friendship that continues to this day. The quality of support and guidance that a supervisor gives to the team will have a profound effect on performance and future engagement of the team members. So let's look at some things that supervisors can do to support their service associate team. First and foremost, and of course, this is my favorite subject, a supervisor needs to be the champion and advocate for the team. Help your service associates feel like they just joined Team Awesome and be a role model for positive thinking. It's contagious. When managing service associates, teach the why. Take a beat and explain why things are done a certain way or by a certain time. Empower your team members to solve simple problems. This builds confidence and trust throughout your team. This was mentioned before, but a supervisor should be walking the floor and approachable to the team for any questions, concerns, or even jokes. The supervisor should also provide timely and correct information to the team. Do not repeat rumors. And finally, quality evaluations should be given in a timely manner. Start working on these early. I like to keep a blank page in the back of my notebook for each team member, and throughout the shift, I'll write down observations and notes. When it's time to write the person's evaluation, I already have a head start. When you help others join Team Awesome, they will believe that their upcoming shift will be a good one. Help your service associates succeed by providing good orientations and address behavioral concerns as soon as possible. Teach the why for the importance of counts and tell them where the numbers go. And finally, a supervisor can spend a considerable portion of their time and energy ensuring that daily shelter operations run smoothly. The better you understand basic shelter operations, the better you'll be to solve problems when they arise. Unfortunately, we do not have the time for a dive into basic operations, but Jody and I do have a few field-tested tips that work for us. To start, walk the entire shelter property a few times during your shift, inside and out, to look for any new problems or unexplained changes. I also take a moment to look in closets, look in offices that we have access to, look in the kitchen, look at plumbing, look at toilets, flush the toilets, run the sinks, anything and everything that could possibly be a point of concern for the building that is being loaned to the Red Cross. Show respect for the property. Treat it better than your own mother's house. This will help build a positive relationship with the facility owner. Delegate appropriate tasks to your service associate team. Teach them the why for shelter operation processes. By teaching others, you will deepen your own understanding. And of course, provide accurate and timely counts. This will assist with future planning of the shelter. Does anyone have any questions at this time?
We don't have any questions. We have several comments. Don't forget there are suggested specialty tracks for some of these shelter positions as well. Alex said evaluations are a tangible recognition of the volunteers' donation of time and their energy. And Michael said new challenge language barriers as well.
Very good point. Great. No, thank you, everyone. Okay. So we're going to be moving on to the important topic of evaluations with Jody.
Okay, so evaluations, something actually that's very near and dear to my heart. So if you have deployed before and you have ever come home with either no evaluation or an evaluation that said, "Thank you for coming, we really appreciate your help," you have come home with a terrible evaluation. Evaluations are very important for several reasons. One, they offer the opportunity for us to let volunteers know what they did well, to let them know that we appreciate their efforts, and that helps to encourage and duplicate that behavior, right? If we are acknowledging what somebody's contributions are, that goes a long way towards helping somebody want to come out and do this again. It also allows us to identify if we have had issues or problems with volunteers, and a lot of us know that that is because everyone's got different personalities. So running into problems is not an unusual thing. The evaluation allows us to identify that as well. And lastly, evaluations are really important because when somebody is applying for a promotion, your chapter, the reason, division, sometimes even national, is going to go back, pull some of those evaluations to see if the person who is applying actually is qualified to fill the position that they are asking for. So good evaluations take time. Anyone who knows me actually knows that I personally probably spend at least 30 minutes per evaluation when I'm writing them, because I write it, I go through, I edit it, I'm looking for changes. I want to make sure that I am writing an evaluation that is, excuse me, addressing things that they have done, their contributions. If I've got issues, I want to address the issues in a way that looks at the behavior, not at the person's character, right? So sometimes it takes a while to get those. All right, so sorry about that. My screen just blacked out on this. Bear with me 1 second. There it goes. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so these are some of the tips that Roxanne and I feel that really helps drive us when we're working on evaluations. So as Roxanne mentioned, start taking notes early. You're carrying that notebook in there, that pad, write it down. Again, things are very busy in the beginning. And when we get to the end of that 2 weeks, if you haven't jotted down something that a person did, or good or bad, right? Then when it comes for your evaluation writing, you're not going to necessarily remember it. So take quick notes, use it as a reference, make sure. So many of you have probably heard what we refer to as a compliment sandwich. So a compliment sandwich works with specific. So when we are writing an evaluation, we want to make sure that we are giving very specific examples of what a volunteer has done. So that's where compliment sandwich comes in. And the way this works is something like this. So the first layer of our sandwich, we want to identify what is something that the volunteer did well. For example, Mary identified a problem, keeping accurate count of available cats, and came up with a better system for tracking them. So I am identifying what she did. I'm also identifying the fact that she gave it thought and came up with a much better workable solution. The middle layer of my sandwich works 2 ways. If I've got a volunteer that's been doing great, what's another example of something that they have specifically done? If I have a volunteer that I have had an issue with, this middle layer is the place that I want to discuss it. For example, I could write, Mary had issues communicating with other team members and frequently interrupted them to express her opinion, which frustrated others. All right, now, when I write that, because I will have had a conversation with Mary about that behavior, okay, and if she has taken steps to fix that, what I could actually write in the middle of my sandwich would be something like, Mary had issues communicating with other team members and frequently interrupted them to express her opinion, which frustrated others. After discussing the situation with her, Mary has taken steps to make sure others have finished speaking before offering her thoughts. So I have identified an issue that I ran into. I have noted the fact that I had a conversation with her. And I have also noted the fact that she has taken steps to try and correct the behavior. And then layer 3, basically, what is something else that you noticed that the volunteer did well? For example, I could say, Mary set up a schedule to ensure seniors and others needing meals delivered to their cots were taken care of at the start of each meal. So I am giving specific examples of what she did. So if this evaluation would get pulled down the line for review, somebody could see exactly what Mary did. All right. Now, this also plays back into when we talk about addressing issues when they occur. For most of us, it's really hard when we've got an SA, or let's say we're a shelter manager and we've got a supervisor that we're having issues with. For most people, trying to figure out the right way to handle that and have those difficult conversations, it can be really hard and it can be very uncomfortable. But it's really important. If you're going to be a supervisor, you're going to be a shelter manager, you need to practice on having those conversations. The worst thing that we can do, and one of the things that drives me nuts, is when I've been part of a team, we've been having issues with someone, and the evaluation is done, and it basically says, you know, John did a great job. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. That's absolutely false, right? So we need to make sure that if we've got issues, we have a conversation with the volunteer, right, to see what we can try and do to change that behavior. And this is also really important because, one, we don't want to be sending that person who thinks they did a fabulous job down the line for the next supervisor to struggle with, as well as I need to make notes of this on their evaluation. And there should never be a surprise in someone's evaluation. If you've got someone that you're having difficulties with, right, you need to take care of it on the spot. You need to pull them into the room. They need to know what is acceptable or not. And having it written on an evaluation without having had a prior conversation is a really bad thing. I can guarantee when they see that evaluation, they will be making a phone call to their chapter complaining, and they will have every right to. So again, a lot of these things we need to practice. We need to understand that part of our responsibility as a good supervisor, as a good shelter manager, is knowing not only how to work with people that are great volunteers, but how do we handle the situations when we're having problems with people. Okay, next slide.
Oh, does anyone have any questions for?
Oh, thank you.
We
Yes,
don't have questions, but we have many comments. It's
okay,
basically
okay.
what Jody said and what Roxanne said earlier, that evaluations are important. If you're going to give a bad evaluation, the person has to know ahead of time. Don't write the evaluation at the very, very last minute to give feedback, and summarize the nature of the work that they did. The sandwiches, comments about the good, the comments about the needs to improvement, and encouraging a path moving forward. So those are good suggestions and everything. And also to provide your expectations ahead of time, to explain why you need certain things. Why do we need the 6409s to be counted? Why do we need to keep the receipts? Why is it important to do our snack counts or meal counts? You know, why is it important to reconcile our registration forms and to do a proper night account? So anyways, back to you.
Definitely. It's all about teaching the why for sure. Well, thanks, Jody, for walking us through that. We're going to go into our next section. Actually, you're going to continue on with this section. My apologies.
Yes, I am. All right. So day shift versus night shift and expectations. So first of all, this was both myself and Roxanne's very favorite slide. And anybody who knows the two of us know that we love working night shift. There's a lot of things that happen in night shift that you just can't experience on day shift. But one of the things is, no matter how many sheltering classes that you take, there is nothing that ever explicitly explains what is the difference actually between what you will see and experience on day shift versus night shift. So we thought that this was a really good opportunity to point out the differences. So day shift, especially the first couple of days, the first week, always a much busier place. You've got a lot of more of logistics happening. You have a lot more people coming through. It may be clients coming in and out. It may be media. It may be politicians and local officials that want to come through. There is more correspondence and communication between the shelter and headquarters during that day shift. A lot more foot traffic, right? People in and out constantly. A lot more facility usage. So a lot of times when we start having problems, say with toilets or sinks or something like that, showers, it's during this time because it gets heavier usage. You may have event-based volunteers that are coming in to help as well. Unsolicited donation gets delivered mostly during the day shift. So the hum during the day shift of a shelter definitely is very different, particularly the first week. Now, sometimes, right, we get into week 2, we get into week 3, and I have worked in shelters to where there literally have been more shelter people there during the daytime than clients. Why? Maybe people are lucky and they've got jobs to go to. The kids have been able to attend school. People might be meeting with the insurance adjuster or FEMA, or they just may be out trying to see what resources are available. So sometimes day shift actually will end up quiet. All right, now night shift, something near and dear to our hearts.
Woo!
So night shift has a very different rhythm than the day shift does. We do reporting of our numbers. We refer to heads to beds. Basically, we are providing a count of clients that are sleeping both inside our shelter, as well as many times we've got clients that are sleeping outside as well. That is the time that we have to do, again, our walkthrough through the facility. Is everything working the way it needs to be? Nobody told me that shower has got a problem. Okay, I need to make a note of that, right? So you want to walk through, take a look, see if there's anything that needs attention, right? Anything that day shift might have been busy and not realized or seen. My apologies, my thing keeps flipping back and forth. Night shift is also the time that we do our housekeeping tours. We are doing sanitizing, tables, chairs, doorknobs, right? Anything we can be wiping down, kitchen counters, serving areas. So we're doing sanitizing in that respect. And this is something that we did even pre-COVID, right? This is just part of our general housekeeping. We may be doing sweeping. We may have to be doing some mopping, right? We're emptying trash cans. So we are preparing the shelter for the next day, right? This part of the reason that both Roxanne and I really love night shift is night shift offers you the opportunity to spend the most quality time with your clients and get to know your clients. So again, people may be out and about doing things through town, but come, 5:30, 6 o'clock, people start coming back to the shelter. Even though we generally have lights out at 10, between those hours of say 6 and 10, people are there. This is the opportunity to get to know who your clients are, understand what their stories are. So it really gives you that quality time. And if you're somebody who is there because you want to really interact with the clients and get to really know them, night shift absolutely offers you that. Special projects. So the shelter manager may grab the supervisor at night and say, hey, you know what? I saw we've got all these cots. They're just kind of thrown in a pile in the back. Can you guys organize this? Or we've got some problems going in the kitchen and things are just not working. Could you guys please go in and rearrange and organize to make, things a little more efficient? So we have time at night to handle anything special that maybe can't get taken care of during the day. Night shift's responsible for making coffee. And as a tea drinking girl, let me say that my efforts at trying to make coffee really suck, but I know this. So what I have done is I usually will ask around to my team members or even clients, and I'll say, hey, who makes good coffee, right? And when I find that person, I say, okay, this is your job. So last August, actually, one of the shelters I was working, it turned out when I was looking for volunteers that I actually had somebody who worked in a restaurant. And she said, I'll make the coffee. And I'm like, fabulous. Because in my head, I'm thinking, is there a huge difference in coffee? Well, what I would like to say is from that morning forward, every day people kept saying, this is some of the best coffee I've had. So if you're somebody like me and you don't know how to make it, look around and find somebody who does. Because I can guarantee you, if you don't have coffee, you're going to have a lot of clients really complaining.
And volunteers.
And thank you, and volunteers as well. And the other thing is basically, this is our time to reorganize, restock. Hey, am I short water? Do I need to go out and bring some cases of water? Do we need to bring in snacks, right? What other things do I look around and see that we can do during the night shift to help get things ready for the daytime? Have I missed anything, Roxanne?
Oh, I think you did great. Does anybody have any questions about how day shift and night shift compare?
Oh yeah, we have lots of comments and lots of questions.
Woo!
Night shift is also one of my favorite. It's my favorite thing.
Oh,
During local disasters, you can't get the time, if you have fewer people, then it's a training opportunity for the newcomers, for our, the new shelter service associates. Anyways, question number 1, Scott is asking, if you're the manager and you have 2 supervisors, is it best for the manager to work the day shift?
Yes, actually it is. And the reason is that because the shelter manager is focusing on the big picture operations of the shelter, they need to be available during the daytime to answer any phone calls and questions that may occur. So absolutely.
Okay, thank you. John Holly said night shift can be heavier on security issues. Shelter
sure can.
Yes, it can.
And Shirley said, disaster health services tend to be scarce during the night shift. Jane, I love you, Jane. Jane asked, what do you do for food during the night shift? Are there any meals left over?
Jody,
that's an interesting one, right?
I could. Do you want to say what
ahead.
you do? I have a particular system, but I'm curious to hear how you.
Oh, how I do? Well, there's a couple things. So sometimes we're lucky enough that we are staying somewhere that we can pick something up on our way there, right? Now, that does not always happen. So in those situations, you actually are hoping that that day shift, when meals are served, that they will remember you in night shift and set meals aside for you. And sometimes I have come in and they absolutely have nothing. And so I make sure that I pack snacks so that if I don't have a dinner, I'm still not going hungry.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I always made sure, luckily, night shift had a car. And so we would be going someplace to eat I'm going to say breakfast, but it was really dinner. And I would always get an extra order of something. So we became pretty hooked on Panera one deployment. And so I would have my Panera breakfast soup, and then I would order an extra soup and sandwich that I would take with me and be able to have it mid shift at night. And then we would have our dinner breakfast after shift.
I do see Andrea's question, who handles evening snacks for diabetics? So if I've got diabetics there and there's a process that, you go through and to find out what meals and snacks that you need. So if we know that we have diabetics, then basically when snacks are purchased, right, they are purchased. I usually will sit down and say, what items can you eat? And then I've got their snacks set aside somewhere. So if they come down in the evening and say, hey, I need to get something to eat. I've got snacks for my diabetic clients set aside. And I did see Cynthia's comment about sometimes you've got shelter managers and sometimes you have site managers. Absolutely, especially right if you're working at a small shelter and it's a single building, you've got your shelter manager. If you're working, a lot of times I know we have when we're working the larger where we have multiple buildings, then we'll have a site director there, and then shelter managers will report to site director.
So I do see that Robin said, if you have a good feeding lead, who will have a meal organized for night shift as well. She says she always prepares for night shifts for meals. So it's also that, like Robin said, if you do have a feeding lead, as a feeding lead, we should always think about, to add additional people to feed our staffs as well, whether it's incoming or outgoing, or the staff that we want to feed. And another thing is you can also use your mission card for your food as well. So let's move forward. We have 20 minutes left.
That's excellent comments, folks. It's a really great group. So yeah, let's move on to one of my favorite topics, shift change meetings. So at first, meetings can seem like this. Basically, it's like herding a group of well-meaning, enthusiastic cats. And these meetings provide the manager with a rare opportunity to address both teams at the same time. There's always the challenge of getting both teams together long enough without interruptions to relay important information while still keeping a watchful eye on the entrance and registration area. Consider the size of your shelter and teams, in-person teams, and have a plan for who will attend these meetings, where the meetings will occur, and how info will be shared with those who are not present. Excuse me, sorry. So to maintain a continuity of service to our clients, the incoming and outgoing teams need to provide updates and mention any notable events that have occurred. The outgoing night shift will thank you immensely if you make this meeting as efficient as possible. So let's talk about some tips on how to make this possible. Arrive early and do a quick walkthrough of the shelter facility to orient yourself. If you are a supervisor, you may not get another chance for a while if it's busy. And usually at the beginning of each shift, you're going to be pretty busy. This should be a quick tour, and it should be a quick tour that won't make you late for your actual shift change meeting. To ensure confidentiality, choose a meeting location where your discussion will not be overheard by other clients. Given the shelter layout, this might be difficult to have a private space while still keeping an eye on the shelter, so plan accordingly. Use this opportunity to confirm days off and last day worked for team members. The timing for these shifts is a little different for night shift, so double check with folks when they are in front of you. Also, make sure you have a person in place for your day off. And inform the team of any client evictions that happen during shift, and make sure the manager knows and verify that HQ has been informed. So let's go to our final section, action items that everyone can do before next deployment. So I know some of you are eager to put on your SV hats as soon as possible, and we have some things for you to think about, maybe consider for your next deployment. Some of these steps listed here may seem a little obvious or a little redundant. However, I've encountered many supervisors that were not familiar with some of these concepts. And as a result, they had a harder time managing teams than other supervisors. So I'll say this again. Before deploying, if you're a supervisor, you really should have an active Red Cross email that is accessible on all of your devices. This is critical for utilizing the Teams platform. Guest users on Teams will not have the same functionality as Red Cross email users. And make sure it's listed as your primary email and volunteer connection. Understand how to set up and use group text strings, how to use Teams on different devices, how to use Outlook email, and how to use Excel spreadsheets. True story, I have used all of these platforms at the same time for one meeting. Start thinking like a shelter manager, take classes, and learn about the bigger picture. This will help you immensely, even if you're just starting out as a supervisor. Know how to complete shelter forms correctly and know where to send them. In the past, I have created cheat sheets for shelter forms that I use while I'm at the shelter. And my my service associate team was really happy that I did this because they had an example of how to fill out things correctly. Definitely embrace and continue your education in technology. I know it seems silly to say this in a virtual workshop, but it's always applicable. For all of the Mac users out there tonight, can you do this work on a PC? Does everyone here know how to set up the equipment in a standard disaster, in a standard DST kit? Reach out to your local chapter if you need access to practice using these devices. So as we conclude, Jody and myself, we would like to thank you for attending, and we really appreciate all of the great conversation and tips and questions and things. So we would like to know just if anyone had any questions or they were curious about becoming a supervisor or just became a supervisor and they had some questions for us. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. You're just so wonderful. It was such a great presentation. Let me just make sure that now everyone can unmute themselves when they have once they have any questions. Let me go ahead and save it. And I think you can now unmute yourself if you have any questions. I do see a hand. Let me just go ahead and go through this real quick. Scott has a question as in, do you suggest 13 hours shifts to give 30 minutes for each change?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
12-hour shifts are long enough. Plus, you need to remember your shift that you are working is 12 hours. That's not counting the drive time to the shelter or the drive time back when your shift is over. So depending on how far away you're staying, I mean, literally you could be working, 13, 14 hours. So no, 12 hours is more than enough.
Okay, thank you. But we do suggest that you arrive early. Arrive early so you can get all the information and to make sure that the outgoing team that they can leave early. Okay, Andrew from Alaska, you have your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Hi, Andrew.
Yes, howdy. I was wondering, versus night shift and day shift, if security would be higher enforced for all the doors and fire watch, and the security would be higher, enforced more, and more doors would be watched, and security would be a lot tighter during night times to protect people while they're sleeping, because there'd be more valuable people sleeping than versus day. Is that not true? I'm just kind of want to verify that. Thank you.
I think it depends on the disaster and where. But it is possible that there will be security, whether it's a private security provided by the facility or county, or it is some of our own members from LSAP, which stands for
Life Safety Asset.
Right. That's like I couldn't remember the L. Yeah. So it's night shift. I would say depending on the shelter.
Correct. No, what size the shelter would be?
Exactly.
If it's a huge one, yes.
Yes.
Okay. And if it's in New York or what city was in, go for that and stuff, and exactly where the shelter's located at. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a great question.
Robin,
Do we
you
haven't? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? New tablet.
Yes.
I also want to talk about the importance of keeping food receipts and knowing who to send them to, because if you don't keep the receipt and take a picture and send it to the appropriate person, whoever's P card you use, purchase card you use, is going to have a lot of paperwork to do to make up for a lost receipt. So receipts are important, and they have to be line item receipts. Something new.
Right. So we do have another session that brings us to the next session that we're going to talk about. We will talk about feeding in the shelter next session. And we
Sorry.
will have a separate session talking about mass care procurement card reconciliation. So that's another session that we'll talk about all the importance of saving the receipts. Do we have any other questions? We have a lot of thank yous and great class, etc. in the comments. Do we have any other questions?
I see a question in there from Bill O'Callahan. What's the relationship of night shift to those living outside the shelter?
Great question.
Nice.
Jody, do you want to you want to
Sure.
take that one?
Yeah. That's actually a really good question. So,
Right.
so if excuse me, if I'm shelter manager or if I'm supervisor, so obviously during the day we're walking around a lot more, right? Visiting clients, seeing how things are going. Night shift may be a little bit different. I still like to have I want my shelter team members to be walking and checking on clients. So generally what I personally do is I will send somebody out in a team, right? And we will just kind of walk through, see that there's nothing going on that is a security concern. In the summertime, right, it stays dark later. So if I'm on night shift, I still can be walking around just chit-chatting with everybody at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. As things get later, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, we still need to be doing rounds. And I generally have people go out twice an hour in teams to walk through.
Always in teams, yeah.
Always in
like
teams.
in-person teams, not platform
Correct.
teams.
No. Absolutely. I want two bodies.
And it's a really good question because given like the issues with COVID, we had there was a big noticeable shift in terms of client populations really preferring to stay outside, and so we really had to rethink how we were going to provide the same quality service to these outdoor populations as we would inside a shelter. And so folks that are choosing to stay outside, whether it's in tents or RVs, we still need to make sure that they're not forgotten about and that they're still receiving that good quality care as if they were inside.
And one more point I want to talk about. So what I have found is that I try, especially if we've got a lot of clients over outdoors, over a larger area, I try and have the same teams visit those same clients. So a lot of times I may say, hey, I need, this team, I need you guys, you're taking care of clients in the parking lot. And maybe, this team is going to be walking through and checking clients and say, I've got a large grass area in the back. So I try to have the same teams so that clients start to identify people, they start building up that rapport. And I think that's really important because if a client knows the Red Crosser, they feel that they've got a relationship, they are more apt to come forward if they see a problem or they see something going on that we need to be aware of, but we may not know about it. So I think building that familiarity by having the same team visiting those clients outdoors definitely helps out a lot.
Definitely. I would ask, like, is there anyone out there in the group that is a new SV that just recently got promoted, and this, and they're waiting for like their next deployment that will be their first time as a supervisor? Is there anyone out there that's just newly blessed? Oh, all season supervisors. That's great. Okay.
We actually do have several, and we do have several people there, service associates as well.
Okay.
We have a question in the chat. Shirley asked, do we have any tips for the supervisor to easily take night counts?
I thank you for asking this question. This is my favorite question to ask people. And it is like one of the counts that drives me insane when I'm on night shift, because if your brain is fried or it's just hard to count when you can't use your fingers and toes, it's just crazy. But the best system that I have learned and have heard from other people is that if you have a large dorm, you can divide it up into quadrants. That will kind of help a little bit. But really what you're going to be counting is heads and beds. And there's a way to do that without you disturbing clients. So heads and beds, obviously you're waiting until that 10 p.m. Lights dimmed time, but you're just quietly walking around doing your counts, not trying to disturb the clients. And I actually will have two people do the same counts and see if they're, hopefully they get to the same number or close enough. Jody, how do you like to do your counts?
So what I usually do is I usually set up an agreement with clients, having a little meeting. And what I will say is that at this same time every night, I need everybody at their cot. Because what happens is you start trying to count people, and then people are getting up and moving around. And so when we are trying to report those numbers by age, right? We're trying to report demographically. So I will say, okay, all I need you to do is stay at your cot for 5 minutes so that we can do our count, and then you are free to go. And I have to say, it's really been rare that I have somebody give me problems. And on the couple occasions that I've had, it's usually a family member that will say, look, just sit down, let him do this, and then we can do whatever we want. And that seems to work pretty well for me.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And I like the informing the clients that this will take place, because it definitely will help you later on. Like,